Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Tom, and I teach sea stuff at the local college. The deep ocean, all its secrets and how huge it is always got to me. But even that faded next to the puzzle that was my wife, Sarah. Yeah, you guessed it, Sarah. Or at least the Sarah I thought I knew. We met like regular folks do. I was hunting for a house, and Sarah was the one showing me around, smiling bright and laughing easy. She was sure of herself, sharp as a tack, and had this way about her that made her seem bigger than life. I fell for her hard and fast. We dated, and before I knew it, I was putting a ring on her finger, promising forever. The first couple of years were good, steady, even. We were building something, I thought, but around our third year, little cracks started showing. Small things at first. Her phone, which used to be just lying around, was now always face down or tucked away in her bag. Nights at home got rare because of work that kept her out late. I wasn't dumb, but I wanted to trust her. I gave her the benefit of the doubt every single time. Then came the excuses. Oh boy, the excuses. She'd explain things with such confidence, like she was daring me to question her. I'm a science guy, all about facts, patterns, and proof. And Sarah? Sarah thought she could trick me with words, lead me through a maze of half-truths, and get away clean. Every cheater thinks they're the smartest person, right? They make up these stories and tell their facts, totally convinced everyone will swallow it just because it came from them. But Sarah made one big mistake. She thought I'd just take her lies. Sarah was sleeping with a guy named Rich. Never heard of him before, but apparently he was a big shot. Old money. His dad made a killing in oil in Texas, and when the old man died, he left all that cash to Rich. From what I gathered, Rich wasn't exactly a genius with money. He was blowing through his inheritance bit by bit, like he had all the time in the world and nothing better to do with it. And my dear wife? She was hooked the second she saw him. I bet dollar signs lit up in her head. The thing is, she wasn't even trying that hard to hide it. Not completely. It started when she sold him this huge mansion in the fancy part of town. The money she made just from that sale must have been crazy. But it wasn't enough for her. Ever since that sale, Sarah had been coming home later and later, always with the same tired line. Work's been nuts, you know? Did I feel sad about all this? Sure, at first. The betrayal hurt more than I thought it could. But then I started putting things together. I figured Sarah would file for divorce, take half my stuff, and run off with the rich guy. But Sarah? Oh, Sarah had no plans to divorce me. Nope, that wasn't part of her big plan. See, Rich didn't just want her. He wanted this whole messed up situation to play out like some sick game. He didn't want her to leave me. He wanted her to stay married. Why? So she could have the best of both worlds, I guess. My steady paycheck, the respectable image of being a professor's wife while he gave her money, excitement, and, well, sex. And here's the real kicker. If she got pregnant, the plan was for me to raise their kid. Can you believe the nerve, the pure audacity of it all? I mean, why keep me around when you could just hire someone to do the same job? But that wasn't the point, was it? No, it was about power. Rich wanted to prove something. This wasn't just cheating. It was a power move. Taking another man's wife, having her on his terms, and then handing the baby to the husband to raise. Winning wasn't enough. He wanted to dominate and keep sleeping with my wife. Now, how did I find all this out? Well, being a professor has its perks. My classroom is like a mini version of the world. Nerds, smart kids, popular kids, and yes, the occasional hacker. One of these tech-savvy students, after hearing my sad story and with a little convincing, agreed to help me out. With their skills, I managed to get into Sarah's phone, finding every dirty little secret and juicy detail of her betrayal. It was all there. Texts, photos, plans. I wasn't crazy. They were laughing at me. Here's the latest twist. They cooked up something special for me. Sarah gave me an invite to a boat party, smiling like it was some big romantic thing. But I knew better. They planned to humiliate me there in the worst way possible. According to the messages I read, they were going to drug my drink, and while I was out of it, make me look like a fool right in front of everyone. So here I was, this invitation in my hand, knowing their sick game. They wanted me to watch them have sex. I said yes to the party, of course. Sarah smiled when I did, probably thinking I was clueless, walking right into their trap like a sheep. But what they didn't know was that I was more than ready for their little game. See, they wanted to slip some mild sleeping pills into my drink, something to make me sleepy and easy to control. Amateurs. They underestimated me. Like I said, being a professor has its advantages. Especially in my field, I have access to stuff most people don't even know exists, experimental chemicals made just for research. Among them is this one thing that makes you see crazy, real-feeling hallucinations. Through some contacts, I got my hands on a bottle of it and a few more things from my lab. When I stepped onto the boat, the first thing I saw was Rich standing there with that smug look of his. He put out his hand and said, "You must be Tom. You're a lucky man. Sarah is amazing." I smiled back, though it took everything in me not to show what I really felt. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had no idea I knew everything. No clue I'd been watching from the shadows while he messed with my life. So I said calmly, "Oh yes, as you know, she is awesome." His grin didn't change, but I saw a flicker in his eyes. Satisfaction, maybe? The predator thinking he had his prey cornered. There were 2 other guys on the boat, big and muscled, clearly there to make sure I didn't cause any trouble. Their being there wasn't a surprise. Rich was playing it safe, but he still didn't get me. I made sure not to look them in the eye, pretending not to notice them standing in certain spots. Instead, I just looked around casually, checking out the boat, the way in, the way out, where the tables were, the railings. I mentally noted every staircase and door. I wasn't just looking at the view. I was making a map in my head. After a few minutes of fake smiles and small talk, Rich turned to the captain and said, "Let's go." The boat's engines started rumbling, and soon we were moving out into the open sea. As the land disappeared behind us, a weird sense of calm came over me. Most people might feel alone and scared out here, but I felt completely safe. After all, this was my world. Water is where I'm good, not where I'm afraid. Hours went by as we moved through the waves, getting closer to wherever we were going. Rich and his goons seemed relaxed, laughing and drinking their fancy drinks. They were confident, not knowing that the prey they thought they had was way more dangerous than they realized. Meanwhile, I'd been walking around the boat, pretending to be curious, getting to know every part of it. I even went to the kitchen where the food was being made and the drinks were ready. It wasn't hard to figure out which drink was for me. It was the one being handled carefully, not just sitting out like the others. But no one saw as I moved around with a plan, using every chance to spray my secret stuff onto the food and drinks. Every little snack, every cocktail, every last bite was mixed with my special hallucinogenic blend. They thought they were in charge, but soon enough, every single one of them was going on a trip. We all gathered around the big table in the main room when Rich stood up. "I'd like to make a toast," he announced, his voice a little shaky. Whether it was excitement, nerves, or both, I couldn't tell. This guy was a predator, and I still felt like I wasn't safe. I raised my glass like everyone else playing along. "To good friends and new beginnings," he said. Glasses clinked, and they all drank. I, however, just set mine down. Mom didn't raise a fool. Across the table, Sarah and her boy toy exchanged a quick, uneasy look. "Honey, you're supposed to drink," Sarah whispered, her voice sweet but tight. "I don't like champagne," I replied evenly. Her face tightened as that little hamster wheel in her head started spinning. The blank look in her eyes gave her away. "But it's rude," she insisted. "Don't care. I gave up alcohol. Bad for your health, you know." Another quick look, this time between the server and Rich. "We'll get you something non-alcoholic, sir." "Sorry. Make it a Coke," I said with a fake polite smile. "Of course, sir." I nodded and turned back to my steak. It was a decent cut, nicely marbled, cooked just right, and the only thing on my plate I hadn't messed with. The conversation went on, boring and pointless. My wife was unusually quiet. I wondered if she was having a last-minute pang of guilt, though I doubted it. "Here you are, sir," the server said, putting a glass that looked like Coke in front of me. I smiled a little too much, reaching for it, but instead of grabbing it, I knocked it over, sending it flying across the table. "Oops," I said, pretending to be innocent. "Damn it, can't you do anything right?" One of the big guys snapped, his polite act slipping. "Sorry," I whined, dragging the word out like a bratty kid, then sighed dramatically before going back to my steak. "It's okay. We'll just clean this up and get you another one," Rich said. I could see sweat on his forehead. Everyone else looked really uncomfortable. It was about to get a lot worse for them. A few minutes later, the server came back with another Coke, setting it down carefully in front of me, like the world depended on it. "Here you go, sir," he said, forcing a smile. "Thanks," I replied, nodding while trying not to laugh at how tense everyone was. I didn't touch the glass, though. My game wasn't about taking chances. It was about letting them sit in their own arrogance until reality hit them like a truck. As I leaned back in my chair, pretending to enjoy the dull talk, I couldn't help but watch the others. Rich, sitting at the head of the table like he was king, had a fake smile on his face. But his eyes told a different story. They were wide, too wide, like he was seeing something I couldn't. He chuckled softly to himself, a sound that didn't fit the moment. Then I looked at Sarah, my dear wife who once promised to love me, now sitting there grinning like an idiot. Her lips were slightly open, and I saw a thin line of drool coming from the corner of her mouth. She was out of it, staring blankly ahead like she was lost in a dream. It was sad and satisfying to watch at the same time. Meanwhile, I finished my steak, a perfectly cooked piece of meat that deserved better company. As I put my knife and fork down, I signaled for the server, who came over nervously, clearly unsure what I'd do next. "Great meal," I said cheerfully, patting my stomach. But those two gentlemen over there look like they could use some food too. I nodded toward the two huge bodyguards standing near the wall. Their silent presence was a constant reminder of Rich's paranoia. The server hesitated, looking at Rich, who gave a small nod. Moments later, plates were brought to the two big guys. They took the food without a word, their faces blank as they started eating. It didn't take long. One of them stopped mid-bite, blinking fast like he was trying to clear his vision. The other tilted his head, then chuckled under his breath. A deep, unsettling sound that got louder until he was fully laughing. And just like that, the giants started their trip. The once scary bodyguards were now leaning against the walls, staring at nothing, their faces soft with wonder. One of them mumbled something that made no sense, while the other drew patterns in the air with his finger, like painting an invisible picture. I couldn't help but smile to myself. Everyone at the table had taken the bait. Every bite they ate, every sip they drank was mixed with that experimental stuff, designed to pull them into their own crazy world. "Captain," I called, walking casually toward the front of the boat. "I have a special request. There's a spot not too far from here where something really amazing happened recently. A natural show that I think everyone should see. Could you set a course for these coordinates?" I handed him a piece of paper with the exact location. The captain, a thin guy with a weathered face, looked at me suspiciously but nodded. "As you wish, sir." What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been carefully planning this moment. 2 days earlier, a dead whale had been reported in these waters. Its body left over from a brutal orca attack. A dead whale in the open sea is a feast for scavengers. A gross buffet that draws everything from sharks to giant squid. Nature's cleanup crew doing its grim work. As the boat changed direction toward the coordinates, I went back into the main room. The scene was a weird mix of chaos and comedy. Rich was sprawled in a chair, giggling like crazy, like he was watching the funniest movie ever. Sarah, meanwhile, was gently swaying in her seat, humming a song that didn't exist. The two bodyguards were still against the walls, their faces empty. One was talking about giant flying fish, while the other tried to catch imaginary stars falling from the ceiling. It was almost too perfect. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced with fake excitement, clapping my hands to get their attention. "We're approaching something truly remarkable, a sight you usually only see on TV. But today, you're in for a live show, courtesy of Mother Nature herself." Rich's head lolled in my direction, his glazed eyes trying to focus. "Wah! What are we gonna see, Tommy boy?" he slurred, his words still condescending even in his messed up state. "Oh, you'll see," I said with a grin. "Trust me, this will be unforgettable." A few minutes later, the boat slowed down. I stepped out onto the deck, the salty wind hitting my face as I looked at the horizon. And there it was, a bloated, rotting thing floating in the water, surrounded by the wild chaos of feeding animals. Sharks circled the whale, their fins cutting through the surface like knives. Seabirds screamed overhead, diving down to peck at the exposed flesh. It was a scene of raw, untamed nature, a reminder of the brutal and beautiful ocean. I turned back to the others, motioning for them to come outside. "Come on, everyone. You don't want to miss this." Rich stumbled to his feet, wobbling as he made his way outside, followed by Sarah and the rest. They stared at the scene, their reactions a mix of awe and confusion, made stronger by the drugs in their system. "Look at that," I said, my voice dripping with fake wonder. "Isn't it magnificent? Nature at its finest." They nodded dumbly, their altered minds struggling to understand. Rich leaned against the railing, pointing at the sharks with childlike glee. "Look at those big fish. They're so hungry." I couldn't help but chuckle bitterly as Rich spoke, his words slurred and disjointed, a perfect reflection of the mess he had made of his own life. Standing on the deck, the wind blowing through my hair, I held Sarah's hand tightly and led her closer to the edge. Her eyes were distant, glazed over with chemicals and the guilt she had been holding back for too long. The question had been burning inside me since I found out about the affair, and I finally needed to hear it from her. "Why, Sarah?" I asked softly. My voice was almost lost in the sound of the waves hitting the boat. "Why did you cheat on me? Was it for money? For power?" Her answer came quickly, her voice low and almost tired, like she had said it to herself 1,000 times already. "No, Tom. It was because of his power. He's smaller than you, bad in bed, and a terrible lover, but he has power and that's what I wanted. I was weak. You were weak. He has power." Her honesty was sharp as a knife, cutting through the bitterness and pain I'd felt for months. I could see the empty look in her eyes, the admission of guilt she couldn't hide, even with the drugs still messing with her head. At least she wasn't lying. At least I got that much from her. Then I turned to face Rich, who was lingering near the edge of the boat, grinning like a crazy person. He was completely unaware of the storm around him, too caught up in his own arrogance and drugged state to see the real danger he was in. "Why did you seduce Sarah?" I asked, my voice full of anger. "Why did you think it was okay to destroy my marriage?" Rich barely looked at me at first, but when he did, his smile seemed even more smug, like he had won some kind of game. "She was hot. You were dumb," he said carelessly, his voice slurring, the drugs taking over. "I'm the man, dude. I know what I want and I take it." I stood there, trying to make sense of the twisted logic coming out of his mouth. But there was no sense to be found. I had seen his type before, men who felt entitled to take what they wanted, to wreck lives without a second thought. But there was something more in his eyes now, something that shifted the tone. "Do you enjoy wrecking marriages?" I pressed, feeling a sick curiosity. Rich hesitated. I saw a crack in his smug exterior, a tear welling up in his eye, and his face softened unexpectedly. "My mom used to cry and tell me that marriages are hell," he said quietly, his voice filled with a strange sadness. "So whenever I see a marriage, I try to save the woman. I try to give her something better." There it was, a glimpse into the broken soul of the man standing before me. A man who had no real understanding of love or loyalty, but who somehow thought his actions were justified by his own messed up past. It was almost funny in a dark way. He didn't just want to destroy my marriage. He thought he was doing the right thing, saving Sarah from a hell he didn't even understand. I was speechless for a moment, processing his twisted logic. But as absurd as his words were, there was something deeply tragic in them. A tragedy born from living in a warped reality where everything was about power and control. He had no idea what true love was, no understanding of the trust and commitment that had held Sarah and me together for years. I turned to Rich, my voice firm but calm. "Jump in. Say hello to the sharks." Without hesitation, he nodded, took a deep breath, and leapt into the water. Rich's fate was sealed the moment he left the boat. I didn't look away. The sharks didn't need a second invitation. They were fast, calculating. They knew blood, knew fear, and they followed that trail like a predator follows a scent. I could already see their fins cutting through the water. Then I turned to Sarah. Her eyes were wide, but I had prepared her for this moment with my words. "Go swim with the powerful man." She hesitated for just a second, her breath shallow, but then she made her move. She jumped in with a determined look, almost as if she knew it was her turn to prove herself. The water churned with a new intensity. The sharks weren't waiting. They were swift, closing in on the scent of fresh blood. Turning back to the two men, I gave them a cold, commanding look. "Follow your boss." They looked at each other for a moment, uncertainty in their eyes. But they didn't question me. They jumped in one after the other, the water swallowing them up like a hungry beast. Rich was the first to be hit by a powerful, unseen force, a flash of silver as the shark took him. And in the blink of an eye, the surface was stained red. Sarah screamed as another shark snapped at her, its jaws missing her by inches. My stomach twisted. The sharks had tasted blood, and they weren't going to stop. One of the men, Dave, I think, was struggling, kicking wildly as the sharks closed in. His flailing just made him a bigger target, and I knew one of those bites would be enough. It was chaos, an uncontrollable frenzy, and yet I couldn't look away. There was something deeply satisfying about watching it unfold. The sharks were doing what they were born to do. But then I saw her. Sarah was closest to the edge now, her arms flailing as she tried to stay afloat. "Man overboard!" I screamed. I knew I had to get the captain's attention. The captain responded quickly. "What happened?" "They all jumped in," I said. No emotion, just the facts. The sharks were still circling beneath the surface, their fins cutting through the water like knives. "Get the Coast Guard here now." There was a brief silence. Then the captain's quick command as he radioed in the distress call. "Stay with them," he said. "We'll get help on the way." I looked back at the water. Nothing. I had already lost sight of most of them in the frenzied, blood-red water. It was too quiet now, almost too still for something that had been filled with such violent motion. The sharks had done their job, and the water, now tainted, told the story. The Coast Guard arrived fast. Their boat cut through the water like a blade. The crew moved quickly, jumping into action as soon as they pulled up. They started spraying the area, looking for anything they could find, any sign of life. Their search was careful, but I knew, deep down, it was too late. The sharks had already done their work. I stayed close to the edge of the boat, my eyes fixed on the water as they swept through it with their powerful hoses. There was nothing left but faint ripples, and every time the searchlight flickered over the surface, I felt a wave of sickness. The Coast Guard moved around the water, searching from every angle, but it was hopeless. I watched as they pulled up a few bits of debris, scraps of clothing, and pieces of what might have been rich. The fragments they recovered were all that was left of those who had jumped in. The water had taken them, consumed them, and now there was nothing. Only fragments could be found. Cops questioned me, asking how 4 people could jump into shark-infested waters. I stuck to my story, that on seeing the whale and sharks, I had warned them not to jump, but they wanted to prove me wrong. Rich jumped first, then Sarah, and then the 2 goons. When the cops looked through my missing wife's phone and found out about the plan to drug me that night, the fact that she had some strong sleeping pills and narcotics in her luggage, as well as more in her car and office, was the clear proof. Rich, of course, was the real planner. They found messages between him and his goons discussing the plan and even getting drugs for their evening entertainment with me. They never found my compound, as I had dumped it in the sea. They had no bodies to test for what they had taken. So, there was no way to connect me to the incident. Eventually, a week later, a dismembered leg washed up on a northern beach. It was clearly from a shark attack. They identified it as Sarah from DNA tests. The cops' visits started again, but by this time I think everyone was ready to be done with it. The police closed the case. 2 years later, I was vacationing at an all-inclusive resort in Jamaica when I met my future wife, Maria. She had lost her husband in the war. She asked me very politely, "Tom, how did you get so much money?" I put down my drink and said, "Well, you see, my wife had a big life insurance policy, and being her husband, I was the only one who could get it. And well, let's just say nature took its course." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.